The Supreme Court may take up the case that legalized homosexual marriage. And if they do, will they overturn it? Will homosexual marriage be ended? On this slice of fresh bread. Welcome to Fresh Bread, a podcast ministry of Grace Bible Church, Gainesville, with Pastor Brandon and Pastor Keith. Well, thanks for clicking on Fresh Bread. Fresh Bread, where we're bringing the truth of God's Word to a starving world. Fresh Bread Podcast 136. And today we're going to look at what may be coming down the pike, as they say, down the road. Homosexual marriage. This was legalized in 2015. And since that time, quite a few homosexual couples have gotten married. And so there is something that is a brewing that may affect that. And we're just going to look at that biblically today. There was just to refresh our memories, there was a Kentucky clerk named Kim Davis. She refused to give out marriage licenses way back in 2015 to same-sex couples. So they sued her to force her to do that. She lost her case, but now this case she's asking the Supreme Court to retake up the case that she lost. And so if the Supreme Court agrees and then hears the case, and they may overrule it, and so that would end homosexual marriage. So I'm Pastor Keith, he's Pastor Brandon. We're gonna try to tackle this biblically. So Pastor Brandon, as we look, by the way, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
You're doing well.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
You look well.
I haven't told anybody any different, so.
So looking at these, the homosexual marriage, and it's sort of become almost commonplace in our society, and even in many of, I guess we call them, and I'm doing the quotes, the air quotes, progressive churches, they're marrying homosexuals. So why biblically should we even care that this could be reversed? Is that a good thing that it's going to be reversed? I guess let's look at that. Biblically, is this a good thing that this is reversed?
You talking about Obergefell?
Yeah, you say it. I can't say that. But that case, if
Obergefell.
that is overthrown, right, and then homosexual marriage, it would be no more.
Well, it would. I think it would throw it back to the states, and we would be back. I mean, I'm not a legal expert, but it would seem that it would throw it back to the states, and some states would continue issuing licenses by their state policy. And other states would attempt to stop issuing or would stop issuing these same-sex marriage licenses. And so I think it would. I mean, I'm not saying that Obergefell should be overturned, but I don't think that's the end of the battle. And that we've won. As Christians, we've won the battle that way.
Should we, as Christians, even really care about this? Because in God's eyes, homosexuals he does not recognize that marriage, right? It has to be between a man and a woman. One man, one woman. Yeah,
I mean, a biblical marriage is between a male and a female. And so, the state, whether or not the state recognizes a male and male marriage or a female and female marriage, doesn't mean that it's a legitimate marriage before God. And so, it's interesting because, the marriage license is a legal thing. And I think that's where, as Christians, we do need to be clear, that the state is giving people the legal right so that they can do the same tax return. There's other, they can file jointly and, there's, have insurance together and all these things that they wouldn't necessarily be able to have or wouldn't be able to have if they weren't married. And so you have a homosexual couple that's wanting access to these things. But, if you look at it just from that point of view, as far as the state is concerned, if they forget about the morality of it, then why not? Why wouldn't you allow them to get married and enjoy the same benefits that a male and female couple would heterosexual couple would enjoy? And so as Christians, though, we have to move beyond the sort of the business aspects of it, the legal aspects of it, and understand what God has said is right and good, because there is a morality to it. You have, a male and a female is unnatural, and it actually hurts humanity. And that's where, I think that's why it needs to be illegal, because it hurts humanity. It hurts children, it hurts families, and ultimately because of that, it's hurting our nation. And our nation won't flourish with that model.
So why do you think so many churches and a lot of, again, call themselves Christians, why do you think they're like they're excited about homosexuals getting married and it's a wonderful thing? And are they looking at more of the Jesus's love, and so love is a good thing no matter what size or shape or form it comes in?
Yeah, I think they are. That's what they're appealing to, is the idea that God is love, which is absolutely true. But as we went through a couple of weeks ago with the Apostle John, he taught us, that love and truth go hand in hand, that you can't just, you're actually being unloving if you're not loving according to the truth. And so if I'm condoning a homosexual couple, I'm actually being unloving, because that is an unnatural union, and it hurts them. It hurts the people who are involved. And there's very rare situations where there aren't major issues surrounding a homosexual marriage. Whether it's male and male or female and female. There's very few situations there's very few situations where it isn't like this major issue that's there. And I don't necessarily want to go any further into that, which, but even as an example, the kids, and you don't have a father, you don't have a mother, you have, two fathers or two mothers, and there's God has designed it so that each parent brings, that male or female, masculine, feminine influence into the life, and they play different roles. My wife plays a different role than I do, and so I just think that obviously if we just look at it legally, then for sure, and if you just looked at it from a tax implication or a medical insurance implications, then you're going to be left with it's okay. But as we look at it biblically, we know that you can't just stop there. It is a morality issue, an issue of morality.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and if we look at marriage too, scripturally, it was God who designed marriage, like you said, and the Bible says, between one man, one woman.
Yeah, Genesis 2, we see the first marriage there with Adam and Eve. And what's interesting is that they were married before God. There was no legal aspect to it, because it was just those two. That legal aspect actually came along, as a man-made invention, so to speak. And so, I'm not saying that Christians shouldn't want their marriage or need their marriage to be that the state would actually view their marriage as legitimate. And it's just that the problem is that the church should be the one that's owning marriage, especially for Christians. And it gets very difficult or very muddled when you start talking about unbelievers and how that works. So as Christians, it can be a confusing issue.
So as we look at marriage, you think it's okay for mankind to kind of change it and make it like it can be two women, one man, or three men, one woman, that kind of thing, or should it just be one man, one woman?
Well, it should just be. Marriage should be. One man, one woman. That's the biblical. That's the truth. That our nation won't flourish if we continue to do to accept the different forms of marriage in that sense. If we continue to accept homosexual marriage, our nation ultimately won't flourish. And so, because you're not going to have strong kids, you're not going to have, I mean, the only way you have kids is male and a female. And so, and obviously science can, do artificial insemination and all that, implanting the fertilized egg and all that. But it's still, those things originated from a male and a female. And those things are, you can't, they're not necessarily a net good if they're used for evil. I mean, they're not a net good if they're used for evil. And so, and God won't, I mean, I'm convinced that God is not going to, he won't be mocked. And so if we continue down these roads that we're on, it's going to be, I think there's going to be a reckoning.
I agree. So what would we say? Let's just say, I'm throwing this out here. I don't agree with this, but some people would say, well, I mean, David had many wives. Solomon had a bunch of wives. So what's wrong with two people of the same sex? They want to stay faithful to each other. And it's actually better for everything because they're not promiscuous. They're staying faithful to each other. I mean, well, what I'm trying to say is all these things they're saying, well, marriage is, yeah, but, there's always a but in there. We can tinker around with it. We can change it. And this is for the good. Like they would say, and you just went through a whole list of why it's not good, but they would say, no, it is good because we are evolving as human beings. Homosexuality is now, there's more people being born homosexual. So this is a good thing. So, and I mean, we can go into it, and maybe I should have you go into it, is why this is not, people aren't there. We're not having more people born homosexual, but born like you. I think you've said it best many times. Sin tends to corrupt the mind, and it tends to lead people down to even more wicked areas. So I just wanted to throw that at you. What do you think of all that? Like people just saying, well, look at David and, marriage isn't sacred. It's something that can evolve.
Well, I mean, God never condones multiple partners in a marriage. I mean, even when Jesus talked about it, he went back to Genesis chapter 2. So, David, Solomon, those who had multiple wives, Abraham he had Sarah, but he also had, what's her name?
His servant girl.
Hagar. And so, yeah, I mean, but the Bible doesn't normalize that. Like, it's not something that's normalized. It's not something that, I mean, when Jesus refers to marriage, he specifically goes back to Genesis 2. It's a marriage between a male and a female, and he quotes Genesis chapter 2 in that. And so, yeah, I do understand why they do it. They try to say basically it's that, because we see it in the Bible, it's normative. And I think we have to say, no, it's not normative. That God intended, what God intended was a male and a female being married and having children. And anything else is unnatural. It's anything else, male and a male, female and female, it's unnatural and it's sinful. And, you mentioned being born that way. And that's a social construct. We're not born homosexual. We're born sinners, but the sin of homosexuality is a sin that we commit. It's not who we are, right? I mean, every homosexual is human. I mean, they're a person, and so they don't, we label them as a homosexual, but they actually are a person who's sinning in the sin of homosexuality. And I think that's an important understanding that we have to make sure that we as Christians understand that it's actually sinful and it's not good. It's unnatural.
Can you explain to our vast listening audience that why we aren't going along biblically with accepting this? Like our church would never marry same-sex couple, but why, let's say we aren't, but the church next to us is. So why are we not? Because they're reading the same Bible we're reading. So what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, because they don't understand marriage the same way we do. I mean, we understand marriage, and the Bible's clear that marriage is between a man and a woman, one man, one woman, and that's it. That is the definition. Well, one man, one woman for a lifetime, and that is the definition of marriage, and that's a biblical definition. And so anybody else, I mean, any other church that doesn't recognize that, they're just twisting the scripture. They're twisting the truth for their own gain, because they want to be seen as progressive. They want to be seen as up to date, and not old fogies like you and I. And yet, for us, we want to be biblical, because we believe that it's the most loving thing to do is to speak the truth in love, right? The most loving thing to do is to actually call sin a sin, and all sin, not just homosexual sin, but all sin. Committing adultery or polygamy. You brought that up earlier. I mean, those are sinful things because they are not what God has designed. They're outside of His design for humanity. And we as Christians, as the Christian church, we need to be standing up for the truth. And obviously, there's all these different ways that people interpret things, but we need to have it starts with having a solid hermeneutic to be able to interpret Scripture as it was intended. And I think that's what we need to really push ourselves to understand, is that it's not going to be comfortable, right? I mean, people are going to say bad things about us, and they're going to think bad things about us. So it's going to be uncomfortable. But at the same time, we have to recognize that, God didn't promise that we would be comfortable, right? He promised to comfort us, but that's a supernatural comfort that might come in the midst of persecution. And I think that we're fast coming to a point where, potentially we're going to start seeing persecution. I mean, we already are. And we had that protest that broke out in the church a couple of weeks ago, and I think is a form of persecution. And I think we're going to potentially see more and more of that, especially as Christians stand on the truth.
You think it's right that as a church that we would consider marriage something that is sacred, or are we taking that too far, or is that biblical? That marriage, because what does marriage represent, right? There's a bunch of
It's a covenant.
Right, it's a covenant, but also it represents Christ in the church, right? It's the bride.
Absolutely.
So it is sacred. It is, in a way. That's why we don't mess around with in a marriage. It's an important moment.
Your marriage should be a picture of Christ in the church. Absolutely. And my marriage should be the same. And are we going to be perfect? No. But that's the idea that we're trying to attain to. And so, marriage is sacred because it's a covenant before God. No, it's a covenant before God and men, actually. I mean, that's why, when you say I do, or some people say I will, that's a covenant. I'm saying that I'm going to be with you till death do us part, right? And that it's not something that I'm going to take lightly. And really not every couple is going to have children, for sure. But I mean, the idea would be for human flourishing, so that well, I mean, even in Genesis chapter 1, He says He created a male and female that they to fill the earth, right? And so that should be, as Christians, that should be our goal, is to see the earth filled with people who love the Lord. I mean, that should be our hope. I mean, even though we know that it's going to, what's going to happen in the future, we know that at least if you're not post-millennial, I mean, post-millennial people believe that that's going to happen literally. But, we would argue that it's going to proceed from bad to worse, and that Christ would come and make things right. but that should be our hope. I mean, our hope should be in those things.
Right. And I think some people might say, well, what you guys are doing, it's just tradition. The woman, the bride coming in with her father and presented to the groom, and she's wearing white, and it's just tradition. There's no, but it goes deeper than that. The ceremony part we're talking about. There's when God brings Eve to Adam, that's kind of representing that as well.
Yeah, the father is bringing the bride, presenting the bride to the groom, and that's what I call it. When I've done weddings, I call it the big reveal. That God, the Father, is revealing this woman to, in her purity to this man. And, that's why women wear white dresses, because it symbolizes purity. And, that's there is significance to even the ceremony. Like I'm not saying everybody has to have a ceremony, but there is significance even to that. And as those who lead those marriage ceremonies at times, we need to recognize that there's a sanctity of marriage, and there's also the statement that's being made to those who are watching. And in most weddings, there's unbelievers there, and so it's an opportunity to make these kind of statements that says that marriage is of God, that God is the one who designed marriage, that God is the one who it needs to be honored in your marriage. And so it gives that opportunity for us to say those things and to hopefully teach people that there is something sanctified. It is sanctified. Like, it is something that's important and critical.
So how much in a way, the ceremony, how much is that? Because it is a covenant and there has to be witnesses and all that is part of it. You invite people to the wedding, you have the ceremony in front of the people, declaring yourself committed to this person until death do you part. But the ceremony alone doesn't necessarily make you married, right? It's how does that work? Is it because I know as far as our country goes, we sign a marriage license.
Well, yeah. Well, I think that if you're talking about legally, yes, it's the marriage license. If you're talking about before God, it's the covenant that's being made that basically solidifies the marriage agreement that you're agreeing before God to be with this person for the rest of your life. That this is the one that you're going to, outside of death, you're going to be with this person, and you're going to do everything you can to work your to care for your marriage and to make sure that it's a godly thing.
No, but what I was trying to get to is that the ceremony, people say it's just a ceremony. It doesn't, but I think there is, that is important because you are in front of the witnesses.
Yeah, there is a significance about it. And you can definitely have a small ceremony where there's only a couple of witnesses, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not a big fan of going to the justice of the peace and just getting a piece of paper signed, because that isn't there's not necessarily a covenant there before God. That's just a legal transaction, and I don't want to see marriage reduced to a legal transaction.
Right. You don't want to have like Elvis. If you're in Vegas, there's an Elvis impersonator that'll marry you. Did you get married in a garage, or was that just your reception was in a garage?
No, it was just the reception.
Okay.
Angie and I got married in a church.
Okay. Because I was trying to remember that. I know there was a garage in there somewhere, and I know you're coming up on your 30th, I think, so you're going to recreate that because it was in Gainesville, I think, right? So
I don't know about recreating anything.
Oh, we were going to, try to get an Elvis band or something for you. And anyway, have you redo your vows. But the vow part is important. But and here's the part I was kind of getting to, and I know I haven't been... Unfortunately or fortunately, I have never been to a homosexual marriage. I don't think you have either.
No.
So I don't know if and this is a big if, and somebody can correct me if they've been to one, but it seems to me that they would try to duplicate. I don't know if it's hard for me to imagine two guys and then the the father or someone walks the other guy down the aisle and then hands him over. I don't know if they go that far, but to me, that would be almost something that would be a travesty or an abomination to God if they go that far. But I think people would just say, well, it's just tradition. So yeah, we do it. But there is it's interesting how it's a counterfeit kind of, I don't know the right words, but you know what I mean? They're trying to take something that wasn't meant for the way they're doing it, and they're trying to twist it and kind of make it fit. But I think that's one of the main reasons why it is difficult to take a homosexual marriage and make it biblical. Like, we can't do it, but that's why I struggle with some churches that, yeah, come on, we'll marry you, and it's a beautiful thing, and it's wonderful, and it's hard for me to really wrap my brain around that kind of ceremony for two men or two women. I don't know if you have the same issue.
Well, I mean, it's just sinful. It's unbiblical. It's unnatural. So, yeah,
Right.
It's good. Anything that's unnatural is going to be difficult to understand. So I definitely understand where you're coming from with that.
Yeah, I mean, to say, well, it's just a ceremony, so we can use the same format, but there are certain things that are designed for the way God has designed it, and when you try to manipulate it into a different way, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But I don't, like I said, I've never been, maybe they don't go that far. Maybe they just stand in front of it, but they do have a pastor or someone, a reverend or someone that's married.
There are elements of a service that has to be, I mean, it's the same thing in the sense of, there's only so many ways you can get married. I mean, there's only many ways you can do a wedding. And I mean, it's just part of it.
Right.
And ultimately what you're describing is a mockery. I mean,
That's
it's
the
really
word.
a mockery of God. So
when we look at homosexual marriage, so do you think, or does it even matter that it's going to be overturned, because it really biblically two homosexuals can't be married anyway? So should this even go to the Supreme Court, or should they just leave it the way it is? Or what do you think?
Well, I've already kind of answered that with that. Yes, I mean, I think if you just looked at the stark reality of, just the legal aspects of it, I can understand why they would want to have the state recognize homosexual marriages. But the problem is that it isn't good for our nation. It's not good because, the human flourishing comes through understanding and living out biblical truth, whether people want to believe that or not. I mean, it's, God founded the world by his wisdom, and, it's unwise to allow for female and female marriages. It's unwise. And because it's unwise, we cannot flourish. And, and it's clear. I mean, it's clear because, of the ramifications of homosexuality, especially male with male. You have disease and other issues that are, because it's a sin against the body, and so we as a nation shouldn't be recognizing that as legitimate. And and if we do, then we're not going to flourish. And there's also obviously a man and a woman can't have a child. And so, that nations continue through childbearing, and we're seeing that clearly as the birth rates have fallen.
Yeah, our country is definitely suffering from a lot of that. Yeah, it's declining as far as population, and yeah, even Christians aren't having as many babies.
Immigration has probably offset it in terms of the population itself, but we're not at replacement rate, or haven't been at replacement rate. So, which is like what, 2.1 or 2.2 average kids, I think what it is for, to have at least a replacement rate. And so we're below that level for sure. And so we can't, as a nation, we can't remain strong if we continue down that road. And so the government needs to stop incentivizing unnatural marriages and start incentivizing, natural, God ordained marriage. So because that is where human flourishing comes from, and it ties right back to Genesis chapter 1, that's how God wants us to fill the earth.
So how does that? They always talk about you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. So if it is overturned and ended, how does that go forward? Like all the marriages that have happened, are they now? I know we're not legal experts. Are they dissolved or I don't I don't know the psyche of people. Would they be angry? Would they be sad? Or would they rebel? Would there be riots? Or would they just, I don't know. I know we can't really see, but what do you think? I mean, what's your feeling on that?
Well, I mean, I there is a sense you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, and we've already gone down this road of saying that it's okay. I think you had a similar situation with Nehemiah, if I remember right, where they were marrying foreign women, and he made them separate from them, and so that's something that's going to really have a huge effect on, if you go through and you say that homosexual, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, but I'm saying that if you go through and you say every homosexual marriage has been recognized, then now all of a sudden those are null and void. That would be very difficult. I mean, that would be something that would be, I would assume that legally they wouldn't do that. Again, I'm not a legal expert, as you said earlier, but I would assume that they would still recognize them until, but that's a difficult question, really.
Yeah. You think it could be like what happened with the abortion, Roe versus Wade? That was overturned. I forget what year, not that long ago. And it sort of, we, as church, we celebrated that because we celebrate life, but it sort of morphed into this giant something bigger where women, demanded the right for abortion, and all these things happened. I mean, they kind of sent it back to the States, but that's kind of turned into a mess. So I don't know.
Well, it's the same kind of idea here, that it's going to be turned back to the States, and if it gets overturned, it's still going to be the states that are going to make that decision. So each state is going to have to make a decision as to how they recognize homosexual marriage, and quite possibly you may have you may have states that dissolve those altogether. I don't know. I mean, and if that's the case, then the only recourse that a person had, or that they would have, to stay married, would be to go to a state where it is recognized.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I'm not a legal expert, and nor am I a prophet, so not quite sure what would happen, but it definitely would be confusing.
Yeah, and biblically, it would be the right thing. Politically, it would be hard, but we would say it's the right thing. But what usually happens, and you've said this many times, is usually when something like this does occur, it boomerangs or slingshots the other direction pretty quickly. And so what that means, I don't know. But
yeah, I think that the statistics, going back to your comment about abortions, I think the statistics are there are more abortions being done now than they were prior to Roe v. Wade being overturned. So
that's sad,
because the states that are allowing it are doubling down on it, like they're encouraging it, and like Minnesota, California, Oregon, those states are, and I even said it. When Roe v. Wade was overturned, I even said it. You're going to have states that are going to become destinations for getting divorces, or not divorces, but for getting abortions.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. So as
it's all messy, right? It's not.
Oh man.
I mean, that's why we have to hold on to Scripture, and I think we have to just hold on to the truth and proclaim the truth, and and I understand politically. I think that's why ultimately the Lord has to return to set things right, because I think that we're going to continue, letting the toothpaste out of the tube, and these things are going to be messier and messier. And I think that's what we're seeing. And I think that's, God has given us over, right? He's showing his wrath by giving us over. That's Romans 1. And I think that's what we're seeing, both in the realm of abortion and now with the marriage situation.
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm kind of, you get to the point where you're kind of just drained from politics. Like there's so much division and so much going on that it just drains you. And so You just okay. I'm just gonna back away from all of this and not put your head in the sand. But sometimes I enjoy doing that because then I don't know what's going on and it doesn't bother me. But this is one of these things that just kind of snuck up. This overturning homosexual marriages. That wasn't even on the radar, and all of a sudden, bammo. And just strange things happen. And, we know the Lord is sovereign, and so everything happens for a reason. But it is interesting. And as we kind of wind down on this, I was just going to ask you, why do you think, as we talk about marriage, biblically married, looking at marriage biblically, why do you think so many young kids today are not getting married? Like they're waiting sometimes in their 30s and 40s, but I know we know a lot of people who are young and single, or at least in their 20s and about to go into their 30s that still aren't married. Not that it's a bad thing, but it seems to be more of a trend nowadays. Is that just what do you think that the problem is there?
Well, we kind of went over that in the last podcast.
See, I need to listen to the podcast.
You do?
I do. That's the problem.
Oh, well, there you go. I'm talking about the one we were talking about.
We did mention, we did touch on that. I remember that.
Yeah, I mean the issue is that marriage has been devalued in our society, and I think we see that even with homosexual marriage. We see that with the fact that people are foregoing marriage, and the government is not set up as much anymore to incentivize marriage. The government should be incentivizing marriage and having children. I mean, the government should be doing that, and the government actually is doing the opposite. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I was going to say, what do you think about now people are beginning to marry their pets? Do you think, that's not biblical?
I don't even know that I need to answer that question.
Well, I know that's a trend now, and I don't really understand it, but like people are marrying their cats and dogs, and
yeah, I like my dog. I like my dog, but I don't like him anywhere near that much.
Yeah, it's crazy. But you're right; it makes a mockery of marriage, and I don't, like you said, if that's part of why people are waiting to be to 35, or if they're just.
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons why they're waiting. People aren't growing up as fast as they once did. They're not maturing as fast. Kids are not. They're not even. You can even see it with a lot of kids are not driving. They don't learn how to drive. When I was growing up, that was a rite of passage, was to go get turned 16 and to be able to go out in a car by yourself and have that freedom. The kids don't. A lot of kids are not doing that now. And, then you have, I think, secondary education has been emphasized, and especially amongst women. And we talked about that last podcast. And so I think you have, women that want to get their education, and they want to start their career, and they want to do all these things before they actually get to marriage and having children. And, I think that's all those things are working together, conspiring to devalue marriage in our country.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's interesting because like my daughter just got married, as you know, a couple months, 2 or 3 months ago, whatever it's been. And it's interesting because, a lot of people are like, well, you're just too young. I mean, people will say that. And, she's like, we're like, well, wait a minute. We want our kids to get married. We want them to have families. That's a godly thing to do. We don't want to go along with the, what the world says. I mean, she's getting her nursing degree, and she still is. But ultimately she wants to be a mother and a wife. And I think that's a fantastic thing. And so many families are not encouraging their kids to get married. They're not encouraging their men to get married. They're not encouraging, or their boys to get married, and they're not encouraging their girls. And it's again, this devaluing of marriage is happening in our world.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's better. Sometimes it's better to be a young parent, because when your kids are in college, you're still pretty young yourself, and so you can go to all their events and games. And otherwise, you'll be in your 60s, 70s, 80s when your kids are in college if you wait too long. So, and that's rough and tough. Okay, so any final word on marriage, homosexual marriage? Is this something we'll keep you posted by and see what happens?
Yeah, I think we just need to pay attention to what's going on, and we need to be standing for the truth and not falling for the lies, especially lies that are coming from, the quote unquote church, those Christians that are wanting to capitulate to the what's going on in the world.
Yeah, I mean, if you stand for truth nowadays, you are considered a bigot, and you're an evil person. So, okay, well, that wraps it up.
That wraps it.
Enjoy your fresh bread, and we'll see you next dough. You've been listening to Fresh Bread, a podcast ministry of Grace Bible Church Gainesville. For more information, go to gracegainesville.org. And thanks for listening.